Welcome to the call. I see Anna, I see Vishal. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this online alumni session. I'm Erica Walk, Alumni Relations Manager at Rotterdam School of Management. Today's session forms part of RSM Alumni Career Days. It's a series that's been designed to provide career support to our alumni community with a month of online and in-person discussions, masterclasses, careers advice, and networking. So if you're curious about any of the other sessions that are happening still on the last day this Friday, then I'll share more information at the end today. Before we get started, I wanted to let you know that this session will be recorded. And throughout the session, we really encourage you to share any questions you have in the chat box at any time. And we'll pick that up with you later when Midas opens the floor for questions and discussion. So let's begin with a brief overview of today's session. Today, we're talking about making impact. We'll learn from our expert alumni speaker about how to connect financial planning with business goals to drive real, measurable results. Midas will take us through a step-by-step guide on how to achieve this and share ideas on how to use our resources wisely and how to turn plans and visions into action. So whether you're working at a for-profit or non-profit organization, you can leave today with actionable strategies to make impact. And now I'd like to introduce our speaker. Midas van Dijk is an alumnus of RSM's MSc in Strategic Management, class of 2014. He's now a finance strategy consultant with over 10 years of experience in business control, IT, and strategy. In 2022, he co-authored Regionalizing Eurasia, analyzing regionalization trends in Eurasia. And additionally, he co-founded Fire of Europe in 2021 to foster EU policy discussions. Midas, thank you ever so much for hosting this session today. I will now hand over the floor to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Erica, for that introduction, and thank you for having me. I'll share my presentation. All right. Can you all see my PowerPoint? Yeah, it's visible. That's great. All right. A step-by-step to strategic finance. Trying to move the PowerPoint further. There we go. So a bit of the agenda. I will start with a brief introduction. What do I mean by strategic finance, to give you all an idea of what we are talking about today. I'll talk briefly about who I am, my background, and my vision for the future of strategic finance. I will ask you all a few questions that you can then answer in the chat. And then I'll address some problems that I feel happen in finance, both in the for-profit and also in the non-profit sector. I'll talk about the solution, a 7-step program to align strategy and finance with each other. And then I'll talk a bit more about how do you apply those 7 steps. I will share some examples from my own experience, and then I'll also open the floor for questions, and then we'll end with a call to action. First of all, what do I mean by strategic finance? What I mean is that the finance is not aligned to the strategy. And this issue can take place both in for-profit and non-profit environments. In a for-profit environment, if your strategy and your finances are not aligned well, it happens often that there's a narrow focus on financial indicators, which can actually hinder an organization from achieving its strategic goals. In a non-profit environment, in my experience, something similar can happen. If the financial indicators are not aligned to the strategy, and the strategy is, of course, the most important part of a non-profit organization, there can be a lack of focus on financial indicators, which can also lead to serious problems for your strategy. And I'm going to come up with some examples there as well. And on the other hand, if your finance is aligned to your strategy, that means in a for-profit environment that you can embody your strategic goals in your financial indicators, making sure that non-financial indicators are not an afterthought, but are like central to your business processes. And in a non-profit environment, if your finance and your strategy are aligned with each other, financial indicators can actually contribute to carrying out your strategy rather than being a hindrance or an afterthought. So a short introduction about who I am. As Erica already told you, I graduated with a Master of Science in Strategic Management in 2014, and I have a Bachelor of Science degree in Political Science. So that's important for me, always has been to combine the two passions for both business administration, but also politics in the broadest sense. So after I graduated, I started to work immediately in the for-profit sector for the first few years. I've worked for the Amadeus IT group in Spain, the Manpower group, and also for MediaMarkt, the electronics retailer in the Netherlands. And more recently, I've also started working in non-profit organizations. Cordate, which is one of the main development aid NGOs in the Netherlands. And currently I'm on assignment for the Ministry of Justice and Security. I started my own business in 22, so I'm now an entrepreneur in strategic finance. I got my experience working as a business controller, as an employee for a number of years, and now I'm adding value as much as I can with my knowledge to help improve strategic decision making. I'm also a writer, as Erica already told you about. I published a book a few years ago about the regionalization of Eurasia, in which I wrote about how globalization is somehow reaching its limits, and we are going back to a more regional world economy, which I think we are seeing also now in the news over the last few years and months. And it's a topic that is very dear to my heart. Political economy, a fusion of politics and economy, in which I mainly focused on fiscal policy, trade policy, and energy policy. And the vision that I have is to combine those passions in a creative way to add as much value as possible, to influence governance and policy through consultancy. Because I feel a lot of organizations in the public sector and in the NGO sector, they have a great vision. And if I can help them to carry that out more effectively and also more efficiently, then I can do a great contribution towards my passions. Moving on, I have a few questions for you that I would like to ask you to put them in the chat. First of all, are you working in the finance column? Are you a business controller, financial controller in accounting, CFO, or not? Are you working in a for-profit or non-profit environment? Most importantly, I would like to hear what your expectations are from the seminar. So I will try to meet those expectations as much as possible. And fourthly, this is something that you can add now, but also later on as you're listening to this seminar. If you're open to it, could you share a problem from your own experience in bridging the gap between finance and strategy? And if you can't think of anything right now, that's completely fine. Maybe something will come up during the 7-step program and also the examples that I will provide. So it's now 12:40. Let's take 3 minutes until 12:43 to enter the answers to this question in the chat. And I'll be looking at the chat as well. I see management consulting, not solely finance, or finance is a crucial part. I fully agree. Vishal wants to learn about my perspective. I'll definitely talk more about that. Reading, learning about strategy and measurable impact and the budget needed to measure your market impact. Yes, very important. Looking for practical and transferable skills. I hope we can help you there. All right, thank you for entering your answers to the questions in the chat. It's 12:43, so I'll continue the presentation. All right, so as I mentioned before, if your strategy and finance are unaligned, it can lead to problems both for the for-profit and the non-profit sector. So in the for-profit sector, we've seen like a number of books come out over the last year that have been very popular, which are talking about the issues that arise if you're solely focusing on financial indicators. So partly it can make you lose sight of other indicators that are also important, not just shareholder management, but also stakeholder management. And even if you are fully committed to your strategy, you can even reach better financial results than if you solely focus on your finances. So I think this is a very well-known problem that we can learn more about. And when I was reading most of these books, I was always thinking, yes, this is great, but how do we make it actionable and how do we actually implement this? So I'm trying to provide some insight on that topic as well. Then there's a non-profit sector, which is perhaps less publicized what issues are there when finance and strategy are not aligned. But it's a thing that I've noticed quite a lot from my own experience, and it also leads to like real world problems. There was just a conclave in the Vatican electing a new pope. Perhaps the oldest non-profit organization, the papacy, which is of course concerned not mainly with finances, but with spiritual aims. However, finances are still something that you need to take into account, even if you are the Pope. And another example, which is to me very close to home, is here, the Binnenhof, the Dutch Parliament. I walk around there almost every day. But nowadays, when I look at it, I see, okay, it's beautiful, but it's also very expensive. And this is one project where the overruns have been particularly egregious. So if we look back a little bit on the news reporting, it was originally supposed to cost 12.5 million to refurbish and to restore this building to its greatness. Then in 2019, the estimate was revised. Now it's 60 million. 2020, it was 560 million. And as of last year, the expected costs is over 2 billion. So from any perspective, something went wrong here financially. And I believe those problems arise because your finances and your vision are just not aligned with each other. So what's the solution? There are 7 steps that you can take to do an intervention to improve alignment. And the first step, which is very hard to do, is to define your vision. No matter if you're a nonprofit or for-profit company, you need to define what you are trying to do. And this can happen at the level of a whole organization, which is defining their vision. Why is the Erasmus University there? What is MediaMarkt trying to do? But it can also be on a lower, more practical level. Like, I want to increase customer satisfaction. Or for instance, I want to increase cross-selling in my stores. How do I achieve this? For those kinds of goals, you also need to have a vision in place. And then once you have your vision, you need to do what I call draft your theory of strategy. Now, this is something that as university alumni should appeal to many of you. You need to have a vision, but you also need to have a theory behind it. And I'll give some more examples of that in the next step. But an example, for instance, is a client of mine we're currently working on decreasing the sick leave. There's too much sick leave in the company. You're going to need a theory. Where does sick leave come from? What causes it? And then you can also decide what are you going to do to solve it. And then the third step is to introduce algebra thinking, by which I mean that the theory that you had in step 2 needs to be made into a formula. A plus B times C equals D. And once you have a formula in place, that means that you can make a calculation, that you can measure, that you can compare. And then, of course, once you have your formula in place, you need to gather the data. Now, where do you start gathering data? My suggestion would be use the data that you already have access to, or that you have access to the most easily, and use that to input that in your algebra formula. Then next, what is important is to evaluate the interventions. No matter what you are trying to do, there is always in place initiatives to improve the strategy. Have you used a new marketing campaign? Are you using a new tool in your customer satisfaction? You can evaluate these interventions by making these calculations in the algebra formula and see if those interventions have contributed to your strategic goal. And then answer step number 6 is to reap the rewards of this process, which are very often unintentional. And I'll get back to that with some more examples. But very often, the goal you are trying to achieve, an intervention such as this will contribute to it, but maybe not in the way that you expect. And then step 7 is to expand. Because once you've gone through the first 6 steps, you can always go back to a previous step and see how you can improve even further. For instance, if you have used this method on a certain problem, can you also use it on another problem that you have within the same organization? If you're drafting your theory of strategy and you've gone through this whole process and introduced the algebra thinking and have compared it to the data, maybe you will address your theory of strategy. Maybe sick leave is caused by people being absent frequently, or maybe it's not the case. Maybe sick leave is caused more because your hiring process needs improvement. In the same way, you can go back to your algebraic formula. Maybe an indicator that to you seemed very important, maybe not as important as you expected. Gather data, always an opportunity. If you are missing something, you can engage on an initiative to gather the data that you are missing. Interventions, evaluate them. If they have done well, continue, scale up. If they haven't done well, maybe introduce another intervention. If it has done particularly well, maybe introduce this intervention, the same one, into a different area. And then as you are expanding, you will reap the rewards again. All right, so how do you apply these 7 steps? I'll go through them with a bit more detail from my own experience. And after that, I'll open the floor to questions from the chat. Yeah, please continue to put in any questions that you might have in the chat, and we'll address them after this slide. So first, define vision. And I can give you an example here of how the definition of your vision and your communication is very important. Once upon a time, when I worked in a nonprofit organization or in a profit organization, we always had this sort of dichotomy between sales, marketing, and finance on the other side. Sales and marketing teams always wanted to drive sales, and the finance team always wanted to drive margin. And the people in finance believed that they were right, and the people in sales believed that they were right. Well, what happened here is that the vision wasn't communicated enough or wasn't clear enough, because from a bottom line perspective, your margin is important, but your sales can be important as well. If you grow your market share, even at a lower margin, you might be able to reduce your costs, therefore improving your profit on the bottom line. So that's an example where a good definition of your vision can contribute to your strategy. Theory of strategy. That is also an interesting one. I mentioned, of course, the sick leave problem, where one issue is my client was doing interventions but didn't have a theory going. So they didn't know where actually sick leave comes from. So using this step, we went back into the literature to get more of an idea on what is actually causing the problem. Introduce algebra thinking. I once had here experience with a client that I'll never forget. He was the leader of a customer experience department, and he was dealing with people calling to complain, to ask questions about the organization. And we were drafting the budget for next year. And I asked him, okay, given that this is going to be the sales, how much do we need to reserve in the budget for the customer experience? And he said, I don't know. And there's no way of knowing. But in fact, he did know. The thing is just that he needed someone to spar with to see if we can put it into an algebraic equation. And we figured a lot out. And it was all about, okay, what are your sales? What percentage of your sales are going to lead to a certain question or to a certain complaint? And then how long can we deal with those complaints? And the intervention that he was doing at the time of introducing a chatbot, how is that impacting all those different steps of the formula? So not only we got the budget there, but we also use this to track progress and improvement throughout the year with every month's new data. Gather data, of course, there's always a lot of data in this time running around in a company. And this process can always help you to first find out, okay, what data do I have that's readily available? And what data is actually so important that you have to make initiatives to make sure you gather that data. Interventions we have talked about. Reaping the unintentional rewards. This is always a very interesting one because you're going into this process saying, okay, I'm going to define my vision, I'm going to define the intervention, and then I'm going to be able to measure my impact. And even though that is the goal, sometimes it can lead to results that maybe you don't expect. Another client of mine was producing certain knowledge-intensive products for their clients, and they weren't doing it on time. There was like a long delay before they could follow up on new requests. And one of the things that was said was we're not getting the information on time from our own information suppliers. And we needed to calculate to make sure that we could demonstrate to the clients what the problem was. But here actually we found out that it wasn't really impacting our production process. So here your goal is something, and then you try and make it measurable, and then you find out that your goal maybe is different. Likewise, I've also worked for a client that needed to perform on a certain indicator. And during this process, mainly during step 4, we found out that actually this indicator and the goals were not reachable, even if the organization was doing all they could, and even if the organization had all the good luck and a happy flow, as they say, they still couldn't achieve that goal. So in this case, you are trying to achieve a goal, and maybe the goal has to be changed. So that's what I meant by unintentional rewards of this program. And then, of course, you can expand once you have gone through the first 6 steps. All right, those are my explanation of the 7 steps and also some more practical examples. So I would like to look at the chat and see if we have some questions. Right. All right, maybe we can start with Anna, who was the first one to send a message in the chat. You were looking for some tips on making impact. Have you heard already some tips?
Well, yeah, definitely. I think that also really following these steps and making it a little bit more structured is already a very good tip, especially also with then first really defining the vision, which is kind of obvious, but then also drafting the theory and really making a formula of it. I think that that also makes it a bit clearer in your head to see, okay, what needs to be improved and what are the variables that need to change to make the outcome improve, which makes it much easier to also really achieve measurable impact. So I think that that is definitely the main idea that I will take away from this this session.
All right, thank you, Anna. Say, Jan, you mentioned a problem about a budget needed to measure market impact. Could you tell us a bit more about that? Sorry, you can't talk due to commuting. Okay, I understand. Yeah, absolutely. Interested to hear more about measurable impact from finance perspective. Comment from Eva. Eva, could you tell a bit more about the background of your comment? You're not in finance yourself? Do you feel like the finance perspective has more information to offer?
No, it's more I'm more in the technical, and we talk about measurable impact a lot on the technical perspective. So I'm curious to hear how that marries with the finance, right? It's just my own background is in a different field. But then I think, yeah, just curious to learn more about the topic from that finance perspective, as I'm not part of finance.
So Eva, when you talk about measurable impact in a technical sense, could you provide some background on what that looks like? Does it mean a new product gets introduced or that the process is changed?
Yeah, exactly. Or, like, are you moving forward with a project or not? But more on I mean, it folds into finance, but I'm not in finance, right? So it is, what is the financial positive impact, but also on the corporate strategy, do you move forward with a new project or not? We have other consideration. Does it fit in our technical portfolio? So in that sense, right? So I'm more on the technical side, and so I want to hear more or deep dive more into the finance side of it.
So when you're doing a project and you're deciding to go ahead with it, there's financial considerations, but you also want to know if it fits into your portfolio. Is the fit into the portfolio, is that something that can be quantified?
Yes. So what I'm trying to say is I'm not dealing with the financial considerations, right? I'm more dealing with, does it fit in our portfolio? Does it fit in our strategy? And more from the technical side. So
Right.
yeah, it's a personal coming from a different area as opposed to yeah, in general, the financial considerations obviously are being made as well, just not by me or somebody like me. Yeah.
So, Eva, do you encounter any challenges when communicating your issues with the finance column?
No, it's usually then once it gets to the decision-making part collaboratively. Up until the decision-making part, some of the bigger projects that I'm working on, you make your technical evaluation first, just because these, I work in subsurface. Subsurface cannot be changed. Financial considerations can change, right?
Yes.
And so that is basically why technical sometimes is ahead before you start integrating with commercial and finance.
Okay.
If that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's interesting. We have Julia in the chat. Looking for some practical and transferable skills, and also in the past, hard to measure impact in the NGO sector as there are many players involved. Could you tell us some more about that, perhaps? I don't know if Julia is still in the chat. Can't talk right now. Okay. All right. Comment by phmdowes@gmail.com. More and more impact is considered decisive strategic issue in civic organization. Yes, but finances come later. How can we integrate it earlier in the process, also in evaluating results? Yes, that is a great question. The thing I think that is needed, and that is going a bit more into the realm of budgeting, is that you need to feel the impact of the strategy in your finances. And that means that you need to design your budget very carefully. If you have a situation in which your budget is always too much for the activity that you're doing, then it's not a driving force in your decision making. So it's important, definitely in civic areas, that the things that you're trying to achieve, that they also have a financial impact. And I think there, the budgeting or maybe even the financing of some organizations could be improved upon. So that could be my first answer. Evaluating results. Yeah, here also you need to know what you are measuring, how you're measuring it, what your formula is, what data you are going to use. And I think that can all really help in evaluating results. And also to maybe promote those results more. A lot of organizations do really great work, but sometimes it's not as visible to the general public because they haven't quantified it, they don't have the proof. And I think here an intervention like this could also really help. So those are the first ideas that come to my mind. Is that recognizable to you?
Well, it's interesting because especially if in the civic realm, we're not very much financially driven, because the idea that it has to do with a certain level of, I don't know, of ideals that you try to accomplish. Whereas actually, if you would like to have more impact long term, it would be interesting to include financial evaluation of what you do and make everybody in your organization more aware of their contribution, whether it's in generating funds to be able to do it and expand your impact, or it's influencing the cost of what you do. But the thing is that in many cases, I mean, that's been my experience, we've been always very absorbed by to realize the ideals, at the same time struggle and fight to get funds for it wherever it came from. So somehow, if you really do it well, you would have to start again from the fundamentals and build it up. Be more conscious of every component that contributes to cost, but also to every component that leads to generating funds and possibilities to have impact as an organization. But in running going concern, when I've stepped in several times, also as an interim manager, you barely have the time to really make that a transition. And sometimes there is like I like impact thinking, and I have two examples where it was just over the board with 20 indicators where everybody got frustrated, like, forget about this, impact thinking is useless. Another place which was more like a startup that was struggling to find funds to continue and didn't really have the time to assign what I said earlier. Activities have a cost, but they could also have a benefit, or let's say an income component. And you hardly have the time to do that. So still struggling to make this work, although I do believe in the impact approach. And because I'm more conscious of the finance than other people, but in reality, in organizations, that doesn't happen very often.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing, Mr. Dawes. I fully agree with what you're saying, and I feel especially
Peter. My name is Peter. I'm sorry, it's PHM.
Oh yeah, all right.
That's how I signed in.
Yeah, that's okay, Peter. No, thank you for sharing. Like I said, fully agree. And I think even if you are like a vision and goals oriented organization, which is not for profit at all, it can only help to be aware of the finances. It can never detract from any other goals. So if you can combine that, that's perfect. So thank you for sharing that. Vishal was saying 2 billion is a good deal because the same project will cost 5 billion after 5 years because of inflation. Yes, probably due to inflation, it will be more than this even. Although, of course, to come from 60 million to 2 billion, it's not just inflation. There have been other things at work here. Vishal, also a question. Why do you think all projects exceed their budget, irrespective of profit or non-profit? I think that happens because when you're deciding to do the project, you want the project to be carried out. So sometimes an organization or the person who is leading the project is going to be too optimistic about the financial indicators, and they're going to maybe downplay how expensive it's going to be. And I think part of the solution here could be that you don't only look at the cost side, but you also look at the benefit side. And if you have like a full picture of your benefits, then it doesn't matter as much if your costs are a bit higher. So I think that's what often happens in a project. You focus on the cost, not on the benefit. You downplay the cost, then the project is carried out in reality, and you find out that your forecast of the costs was too low. Vishal, does that answer your question, or would you like to share a bit more on this, perhaps?
Can you hear me? Is my voice audible?
Yes.
Thanks a lot for your insights, Midas. What you said is right. What Peter said is also correct. But the reverse of it is also true. For example, I can also look at it in this way, that every department should not be made aware of their financial impact, because this might affect their creativity. So, it all depends on how you look at it. For example, if I am leading a startup, I should not be so much focused on money, because if I do that, I might not be able to achieve the end result, which will become like a disruptive product or a service in the market. which the market will appreciate, but much later. So recently I was talking to an entrepreneur who was blowing up money for last 10 years, and finally in the 11th year he made money. So it was quite an experience what he went through. And then looking at his example, I feel that, it all depends on, for example, if you are a research and development scientist, management should never bother you with money, because if they do that, then you will stop giving your best. You will be more focused on money than rather looking at the latest chip which can be disruptive in the market. So it is a very, very subjective. And what I always felt is, whether it is profit, non-profit, all budgets are exceeded. So finally, if everything was so structured and everything was so well organized, then why did things go wrong? And I can take some names of some big organizations, but maybe it is not correct to do that. But I have seen organizations also blow up money 10 times more than what they had initially planned. And they had strategic advisors, they had cost controllers, they had auditors, everyone was there. But when things change, they change so drastically that it is very difficult to manage costs.
So, yeah, so Vishal, you mentioned you feel like there's always cost overruns. Why do you think that is the case?
Because there are too many variables.
Hmm.
This is what I feel, that the variables are so many that one single human being cannot actually assess them. Suddenly a new president may come and introduce some tariffs,
It's
that
true.
can throw all your costing in the air. And then how will you justify that? You cannot justify that. So also some material cost fluctuation can happen. Some country, if it is not getting their chips on time, they may increase the cost of precious metals what they have. So there are so many reasons, political, non-political. Suddenly the interest rates can go up, again your costing is out of the charts. Some good people may leave, so corona may happen, a pandemic. So there are too many variables. This is what I learned in the last few years.
All right. Vishal, I appreciate your point of view. You're saying we're in a very volatile situation, and some startups especially can be in a volatile situation where you can't apply like the same methods as you do with established companies. So I agree with you. I do feel that even in such a situations, there are ways to make your success measurable. So, for instance, I'm thinking of the book Lean Startup by Eric Ries, in which he does devise like a system he calls innovation accounting, that even in a startup, disruptive startup setting, you can still use accounting to show how you're doing. Uh, I'll put it in the chat. So I would recommend you to, if you don't know it already, to check that book out maybe sometime and let me know how you feel about it. All right, thank you, Vishal. Comment by Lisa. I'm looking for how can both financial and implementation parties work in homogeneous pattern because I believe their visions are different. Lisa, could you tell us a bit more about how you feel those visions are different?
Hi, good afternoon. Actually, my background is more related to the nonprofit. So I used to work with the USAIDs, and they were the financial part and even the implementation, they were aligning. So both they have the same and they want the same outcome. They want to make it work. But right now, maybe for instance, I'm working in profitable company having the CSR, like the corporate social responsibility.
Yes.
So mainly they are focusing on the profit and the nonprofit is on the side. So then we are focusing on gaining money. And then when we have like maybe some surplus, then we are getting back to you. So it's kind of, they don't have the same vision. The most important for them is then the profit. And then we will get back to you and have some surplus and then we can focus on your financials. So it's kind of for them, it's extra work. For us, we are a profitable company. We're looking for the money. We're looking for the profit. Yes, nonprofit is important, but not that important. So our vision is totally different. So when it comes to asking them how to do like some impact, help us to just doing the financial matter, they are resisting because sometimes for them, this is not that essential. This is not the main concern for them. For them, they have to do their semi-annuals for the profit part, and then the non-profit, we will do it anytime. And this could make a lot of problems for us because we have a lot of contractors we have to deal with. So this could impact the progress as well. So the thing is, I think maybe I'm just talking from a very specific thing, which is the non-profit. But actually, I think when it comes to the vision is not aligned, this cause a lot of impact with the implementation progress and the timeline of the project. So this is my thing. This is my experience, honestly. If they are not aligned and if the entity is not operating only for a specific thing, either profit or non-profit, they are not having the same vision. So this is impacting as well the implementation.
Thank you for sharing that, Lisa. I think a lot of people will recognize your issue that you are dealing with. I think you're definitely not alone in this. What happens all too often is that an organization is driven by profit and is also willing to engage in CSRD, corporate social responsibility drives as well, but is reporting that alongside their financial indicators as a separate thing. While I feel it would be better if you would integrate that within your key reporting, within your key financial reporting, because a lot of those things, if you think about it, can be quantified. If you're not reaching your goals on environmentalism, for instance, what will that do to your suppliers? What will that do to being compliant with new government directives? What will that do to your investors? Are some investors maybe going to change their strategy depending on how your CSRD is progressing? So first of all, the solution needs to be that the people at the top need to have that same vision, that they do feel that it's important. If you want to get started on this from a different point in the organization, perhaps a solution could be to quantify those things. Like if we don't do this now, okay, we don't meet this CSRD indicator, but what does that mean for the bottom line? What does that mean financially? And I feel if you can make those things more financial, maybe they can get more attention within the company as well. But it's definitely hard, and yeah, every initiative needs support at the top to succeed. Does that answer your question, Lisa?
Yes, thank you. Actually, I really, this really relate to the case. But hopefully, because I think they have different perspective, they are so concerned with the numbers, and we are more concerned with the indicators and tracking the progress. So this is the thing, they are just focusing on tracking different things. So for them, it's not essential, the progress and the impact. For them, they are just handling their documents, their financials, and the numbers are good and everything is fine in place. Like, okay, bye, just implement whatever you want, do whatever impact you want. This is not our vision. I believe that they only want their financial reports to be good because I'm in the project management part. So they just only need their invoices, their things, nothing with the impact or just helping out with the progress, only the documents in place. So this is the thing. So I think being transparent is good, but actually, again, if the company itself, the vision is more about the profit, not even I think the top-notch people in the company are supporting as well because it's a side thing. This is not the main thing for the company. They are not opening the company for the non-profit. So for them, this is something aside.
Yeah, I think definitely a problem that many people can recognize, and I hope you can make some progress in the near future. All right, thank you very much for sharing that, Lisa.
Can I? I'm just a thought. You have
Yes.
a list of 7 points, and I was just thinking, reflecting on the conversation. Very interesting. The difference between the stage of where a company or a firm is, whether non-profit or profit. Maybe there's a point 0, which has more to do with, I don't know how to say it, but the intention of the mission, where, for instance, you can reflect that a startup has different requirements, where maybe the impact there would be find that disruptive new model, something you would not do in a, say, a going concern organization that looks at things and markets and developed markets differently. It's just a thought. I mean, it just so then in that case, the mission for, let's say, an organization has been alive for years and is expanding or whatever, has a different mission, while looking at aligning vision and finance. Just a thought.
Yeah, thank you very much for sharing that, Peter. I'll give that a thought as well. And maybe there should be a point 0, but definitely this should be reflected also in this framework. So thank you very much for sharing that. Right. Okay, if we move on, I have a call to action. I would love if you would shoot me an email or a message on LinkedIn, and I would like to ask you all a few questions. Like, 1, how could this presentation be improved? Do you have any questions or even feedback or additional ideas, just like Peter, on the 7 steps? And I would love to hear them.
I can give a small feedback on
Oh,
how you can
okay.
improve this presentation. What I would have liked to see is like you take one complex example and you go through all the 7 points. Because now what has happened is you have scattered, and then it is very difficult for me to see the end result from the starting, because for every point you gave a separate example. I would have liked to see one example which covers all the 7 steps, because then I have a better idea of what you are trying to say. I can learn more from you.
All right. Yeah. Thank you for that, Vishal. That makes a lot of sense. Absolutely. So yeah, to finish the talk, do you have any question or feedback on the 7 steps? And also, if you have any questions on your own situation, you need any advice, just please reach out.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Thank you ever so much, Midas. That was a really thought-provoking and interesting session. Thank you ever so much for sharing your experience and hosting this nice exchange with the community here. I wanted to say thank you also to everyone who's joined live today, and those of you that joined in discussion out loud or via the chat. It's really great to have you involved and connecting. I hope that you found this session of great value and interest. If you'd like to explore the topic further, as Midas said, you can connect with him. I shared his details in the chat. We'll also share the 3 call to action points and his details in a follow-up email later today. And if you're interested to be a speaker, like Midas today, on a subject that's close to your heart or in your area of expertise, then you can always contact the alumni office, alumni@rsm.nl, and we'd be happy to think along together about possibilities with you. And we're always super grateful for alumni like Midas, like you, bringing options like this to the table to share with the community. So thank you again, Midas. And finally, to everyone else, there's still some tickets left for this Friday. If you're in reach of Rotterdam, then there's the on-campus day. So you can see the link in the chat there, and it would be lovely to see anyone in person if you're in reach of Rotterdam. Thank you again, everyone, and goodbye for today.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thanks, Anna.
Appreciate it a lot. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Peter.